It's been a while since I've done a carving video because it's been a while since I've done some carving. But I have a box to make, and I have just carved these two panels, one as a practice and the other for the front of the box. So this is the pattern that I'll show you how to carve in this video, and it's like much of my work, it's based on carvings done in Ipswich, Massachusetts in the second half of the 17th century. And this one is by and large a freehand pattern, but I'll show you some center lines I used and a little bit of compass work, but then how to draw all this stuff and cut it with a V-tool and then cut out the background and decorate it. This one, I'm spreading black paint on it because this one I did the other day, and I've just got oil on my hands and picked up some of that paint. But you see it's the same pattern squished in here. It's a slightly shorter board, but also using the paint to highlight those carvings. After having established the margins and a vertical and horizontal center line, there was just a couple of pieces I struck in by measurement and compass. These two circles and this urn. And the urn is done with a marking gauge to strike the top and bottom lines of it, and then a compass to just strike the ends of it. And these, of course, are just compass work. To locate them, I just sort of divided the width of the carving into eighths in that case. The layout to this point for this carving is some basic stuff, horizontal and vertical margins and horizontal and vertical center lines. And then to locate this urn, I don't know if that shows up there. It's simple enough with a marking gauge to define the top and bottom limits of it. The top one falling just a little below that horizontal center line. The length of that particular urn, I decided was, I split the whole panel into eighths and walked off 1, 2, 3 units, left and right, leaving me with 2 units in the middle. So it's 3, 2, and 3. And that's just based on just sort of guessing how this is divided up there. I didn't measure the components of this box. Then to locate these two circles, they fall below the center line and hit the bottom margin. And with some similar sort of monkeying around, I located those and struck them. And now from that point on, this pattern will be freehanded. I've got a piece of chalk that I'll sketch a little of it in there. And the first pieces I establish are these 4 flower shapes in the corners. Lots of times when I'm looking at these sort of freeform designs, here I have one that I carved the other day with a squashed urn. It was a narrower, not as long a piece of wood. One of the things I like to do sometimes, or it helps me see the patterns better, is to look at that negative shape. And now that I've painted it, you can see it a little easier. It's one thing to draw the leaf or the flower itself, but then when you look at the space between it and its neighbor there, that can help you sort of get it sometimes. So it's like a bit of a Rorschach test. And the spacing is now in relation to that pardon me, to that circle there. and the horizontal center line. So I want this piece to bend both near and then away from, back to that rosette. And now the other tip of that comes up to the horizontal center line. And I don't want those to hit. There's a stem between them. So they have to sort of find their way. And then the central part of it falls right down into the bottom corner in this case, the top corner in that case. So if this was to come about like that, and I like the relationship, there's enough space there between it and the rosette like this. So I'll do a similar thing up here. But here's where I'm now looking at that negative space, or trying to. And another thing to sometimes do is to look at a horizontal design vertically, or a vertical design horizontally, either one. But sometimes you can see things a little differently. You just step back a little and get a different viewpoint, and that's pretty well balanced. And I might make some adjustments when I carve it. This one kind of droops further this way than that one does. But it's also got 3 chalk lines there. So by putting my V tool up here, it might hide a multitude of sins there. Let me do a little of that carving. And this will all be V tool work to outline this pattern. And I'll start right there where I saw that this droops down lower. So I'm going to move this up a little. That goes right to that horizontal center line. And then this one comes same way. And it's not perfectly balanced, but it's real good. I'll leave that just as, there's nothing I can do about it anyway, but I'll leave that just as is. This cut I'll turn around and come in from here to meet that. And you see that I go the full depth of my V-tool work at once. I'm not trying to go over this twice. And there's that space for the stem of that. It's not quite wide enough. I'll do the same thing up here. That. Sometimes whether I'm coming or going just depends on where I am and where the piece is on the bench and how it's easiest to get at it. Now I'll just connect the dots behind there. Finish those outlines. Like that. And now I'll try to do the same thing down on this end of the panel. I just took a reading with a compass for the point about where those stems come off of that horizontal stalk, and just to give me an idea of where I'm gonna be taking off from. It's right about there. And those can get me that spacing for the bottoms of those leaf shapes. And this one is the one that curls to hit that that horizontal center line. It's a little close there with that hold fast. One thing you can sometimes do in a case like that is grab the piece with a stick and put the holdfast on the stick. So that pinches it down and gets the holdfast out of the way. I don't know if that showed up, it probably didn't. And so now I've drawn that sort of rounded shape, and I can compare it to the one that I just carved. And some of what I'm seeing is this one is broader that way. Oh, considerably so. This is the distance on the one I just carved. And I don't want that big a disparity. I don't mind some differences in handmade stuff, but that's pretty significant. So could have done that first. And now that I have that, I'm going to carve it even before I draw the rest. So now I know that it agrees better with what's at the other end of the board. So wipe away that chalk so it doesn't mislead me. And so this comes in like that. And this one curls down pretty close to that circle. Like that. And the one up top goes ways like that. Not only do I not mind if they're different from the others, I particularly like them to be, but I don't want them too different. That's not quite grabbing that as tight as I'd like it to. So once I have this stuff carved, I'll put the holdfast back on it. Cut across here, and those are the easiest cuts to make, going across the board. Going along the board, the tool sometimes wants to follow the fibers of the tree, which can get tricky. And so that's enough to get that laid out. And I know I have the circles laid out, and they too have a stalk, a stem, connecting them to this long horizontal rib. And so I'll just pencil that in about like that. In which point then I can outline this. We'll do that. And there's an inner circle to that rosette that I didn't strike yet. Might as well do that now. And so from there I'll carve that other one. And then there are leaves like these between the urn and the rosettes. So those will come in next. Alright, so more freeform stuff. And this leaf, this flower, comes from a funny place. It comes, you can see it in this one I carved the other day. It comes from under the urn, and then up beside it, and hugs up between the urn and that rosette. And so let's see. You start out with sort of what was the usual base of the urn, and then this comes right off of it, up like that. And now this leaf or petal or whatever it is comes like that and blends right into there. This one bends in the usual way, and now this part will tuck right under that piece I've yet to carve, that stem, like that. So there's a lot of leeway. You can get away with a lot. I might as well outline that urn first. And so to finish off that cut, I just lower the handle of the V-tool like that to come out of that cut. And here. I'll do the same thing about there, and I'll deal with that later. And I'll get the stem of this rosette here, this flower. Like that. And same thing, just lower that handle to end that cut like that. And now like so. And this one kind of takes a couple little bends, comes up and then down, and then bends in right there. And here it hugs that rosette and then bends away to come in there. So that's the basic outline of this half of the bottom half and a little bit of the top half. Here I'll do the foot of the urn. Like that. And the bottom margin there, bottom margin here, and I'll carve that on my left side and then move up to the top half. So it might help to see it again, drive home some of those points. And in this case, I'm not looking as much at trying to make it symmetrical to that. I'm sort of stuck with this space between the urn and the rosette, so there isn't very far to go. And it comes off of there and bends like that. The stem comes down, and then this one bends down, and then up, and then down. And its top half can come right like that. This one really reaches pretty far above that urn, right up to there. And then bends into that area like that. So I'll do the same thing. I'll work on the urn. And now you can get that point where this hits the baseline by measuring it from that center line, or you can eyeball it. I just eyeballed it. And then it comes up. Right out of there. sometimes those tight curves, you maybe can hear my feet shuffling around as I come around. I'm not just turning my arms, but moving my body as well to make the rest of that curve. I think you'll see it here. Right now, my hips are kind of parallel to the bench, but I start right away by dropping my left one away from the bench and now bringing it back. And as I did, I shifted my weight from my right foot to my left and swung my right leg way behind me. The shop's too small to get all those moves in the video, but some of it comes from down in your feet and your legs. And the bottom margin again. Oh, missed a piece here. I'll put that. Stem for the rosette there. Some of this now gets so basic, but it's still, I have to go over it. I'm going to pick up from that stem and come along the horizontal line and then bend down to this one. So I'm going to be a fat 1/8 of an inch below the horizontal center line. And then bend to that shape right there. There's the other part of that. Do the same thing over here, which might be out of view. So now to start looking at the top half of this pattern, I had made a mark where these leaf shapes here, the tulip parts, sort of hit that top margin. And again, got that by sort of just estimating that spacing. And this is about half of the length of the pattern, just then centered on the center line. And that's just a reverse curve that comes down and sweeps over and then bends down into the urn, sort of like that. And the hardest part for me for carving like this is that long line and making the symmetrical equivalent of it over here. That's where I absolutely have the hardest time, because the rest of it is so freeform, but that pattern is centered right in the middle of it's the most focal point in the carving. And to get that curve and this curve to agree with nothing to measure them by, and they're not struck with a compass. So that comes from a good bit of practice and a good bit of luck. So I'll carve this one and then fill in one side. That's the chicken way to do it. And it goes all the way up to the top margin. And now what happens between there, this is a standard part of this vocabulary, and it's a large central leaf that has a sort of reverse curve in it and a thick stem in the middle of that leaf with this V-shaped void at the bottom, at the base of it, and then a rounded leaf left and right of it. You see this in the panels quite frequently. And so it's a shape I'm quite familiar with, and just sort of picking a point where I like that, the middle one, the one with the reverse curve, to be the biggest. And then this is just a sort of rounded one like that, and as is this one. So that curve might be a little bit to my left, a little far to my left, because there's supposed to be a space between here. So I might do some adjusting right away and make that curve the inside of this leaf shape. Told you that was a hard one. So that now is the outer limits of that sort of leaf. And I'm going to move this line over from what I initially carved. Is that showing up? So here's where, this is the new line I just carved, and it's going to be the outside of that rounded leaf. And I'm going to move this, which was my first line I carved. And it'll work out because there's a void between them. So I'm just going to go about like that. Still hits the top margin in the same spot. So now here I'll come up to there. Like that. And this one is just rounded. Like that. And I can carve the rest of this line now. There. And then there's a little void that goes right here, and that's one that I will use a gouge to at least define, like that and like that. So that's a 3/4 inch wide gouge. I forget what size circle it is. But it just gives me the basics of those curves. There. And inside that is a stem. Which gets narrower towards its tip. Like that. So now, now to really be able to repeat that over on my right. I don't have a lot of room on this panel. There's this small pair of accents here, a little round one and a sort of a pointed one that connected to the margin. And I don't have quite so much room right there, and I might just leave those out. So I'm going to just carve off the margin. Like that. And I think I'm going to jump steps here a little bit and remove that background because that's so disorienting, those V2 lines that were mistakes. It's going to cut out that background. That will help me see what I'm going to do over here. And to cut that out, I have that very shallow, curved, half-inch wide tool with a slightly crowned profile. It's not dead straight across. And I'll just sort of start with the gouge, taking that down to those V2 lines, like that. And in that narrow space, I'm tilting it. I've brought this wing of it, this corner of it, up out of the wood, the other one down in it, to just come there. And then reverse it coming the other way. Put my left hand corner down in the V2 line and the right hand corner up in the air. One of the things to watch out for, today's a very hot day, and so with the oak, if you find your hands are getting sweaty and you're on the steel, you can transfer some staining to the oak, the moisture and the tannic acid and the iron, and so you can stop and wash your hands now and then. That's pretty much all I needed to do to get that out of the way. I'll come a little bit this way. Take that right down to those V2 lines. And this one, like the practice carving I've been showing you, is going to be painted. So that hides a multitude of sins and emphasizes some others. And so now I gotta map out how to get that same curve over here. Here's what I'll try to do, and this is still an approximate thing. I've set the compass from that vertical center line to where the V2 line hits the margin there. So that point is about where I had originally intended it. And then pick various spots, say about here, and just try to see that I'm at the same height. I could measure it. Gets to be a little too much sometimes, but so that's about just over 1.5 inches and from the margin, and there I am there. And do that in a couple of spots. But you're still dealing with a V-tool line, and it's sort of a beveled line, 2 5/8. And right there. So you can take these spots and then sort of connect the dots. That's 3 inches. That's 3 inches right there. So I'm using the compass to go left and right from the center line, and then the ruler from that top margin. And that is going to be good enough for me. And once I establish that line, then this one sort of falls from it. So here goes nothing. And when you're really warmed up and in the flow of things, you just carve both of those lines with no measurements, no thinking. Just cut them. But that's not today. And now the rest of it is just sort of sketching in that shape. This one comes off of here and up like so, and you can just get a guess for the height of those, and that'll be all right like that. And then that connects to there, and there's just a little tiny line right here and right there to get those two out of there. And now the central leaf to this, which is simple enough. And you could do that with some very large gouges to define your curves. You could use the gouge to sort of walk that off like that. Make one of those inverted seagulls that I talk about. Well, not inverted, this is right side up. But this curve is deeper than that. So I do this one freehand as well. Like that. And now just bend back up to the margin. Like that, and cut that out. So, to locate that point, which is really all you need now, you can go like that. And remember, the phrase Jenny Alexander taught us years ago, the eye is very forgiving. And that'll get you through a lot. So there is I hate it when I do that. I start a sentence and then I begin carving. There is the beginnings, the bulk of the V-tool work. And the rest of it then is cutting out background and adding the accents. Which I'll show you.